This video is for anyone interested in astral travel or out-of-body experiences, but I dedicate it to those who have had involuntary experiences. It can be very unnerving and stressful, to say the least, when you don't know what is happening to you. There is no bigger fear than that of the unknown. I know now and believe with all my heart that out-of-body experiences and astral traveling are safe. If you ever get the chance to experience one, consider yourself blessed. This video is about my experiences as a kid and in my younger years when I didn't understand what was going on. If I only knew then what I know now, I'd have a lot more good stories to tell you about. My first O.B.E was right around the age of 16 or 17 years old. I'm 39 now. I wake up, at least I thought I did. I get up and I walk straight through the sofa bed where my mom and dad were sleeping. And as I walked through it, I guess I kind of glided through it. I guess I was like kind of floating. I went through the bed and it freaked me out. So I turn around because I was sleeping in the living room with them and I was on the couch and I see my body and it freaked me out. And so I guess I snapped back into my body. I fell onto the floor, but there was a coffee table there and I hit my forehead on the edge of the coffee table and I had a scar on my forehead for the longest time. You can barely see it now, but that was the first time that I knew I left my body. The second time that I left my body, I was in my room and I was about to fall asleep. I was getting tired, but I was listening to the raindrops outside and I could hear the rain, and all of a sudden the raindrops started to get louder and it was like as if I was being hypnotized. All of a sudden I felt very light and I was rising to the top and I could see myself going to the ceiling. I went through the ceiling on top of the roof and I snapped back into my body. I guess I got really scared. And now looking back, I know that that was an O.B.E. At the time, I don't know if I really believed or even knew what it was. I was just confused. Around the same time that these out-of-body experiences were happening to me, I experienced my first sleep paralysis. And at the time, I don't know if there was a whole lot written about it, but it was scary. I didn't know what it was. All I knew is that I was conscious. I was awake, but I couldn't move. I couldn't move and I couldn't talk. And I remember when this happened, the television set was on and there was news coverage of Anita Hill and I think Clarence Thomas. It was like some big sex scandal. And I remember hearing that, and I remember hearing my mom and my little brother in the background because she was helping him get ready for school. And I'm awake, but I can't move and I can't speak, but I can see and I can hear. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, am I dead? Or, am I being possessed? It seemed the harder I tried to move, it felt like there was a presence that was pushing me down, trying to hold me down. So the harder I moved, the harder the resistance was. So about after a minute, maybe a minute and a half, this spell wore off and I'm able to get up and I'm awake. I can move, I can talk. And the television set, I noticed, was airing the same news coverage that I had been hearing while I couldn't move. So this told me that I wasn't dreaming and that I was awake and experiencing something that I didn't know what it was. Soon after that first experience with sleep paralysis, I began to realize and learn things about myself. Um, One of the things I've learned was to never sleep on my back, because if I slept on my back, most likely I would have one of those attacks at night. So I began sleeping on my stomach and on my side. But even then, sometimes that demon would still get me. Another thing that I learned was that there were clues that were given to me that would almost be a surefire sign that I was about to experience a sleep paralysis attack that night. And one of them was I would just get a strange, eerie feeling that there was a presence in the room with me and I was afraid to go to sleep. That was one clue. A second one would be, if I'm trying to go to sleep and I open my eyes, I know this is going to sound weird, but I would see a shadow on the wall, and it would be in the form of a spider. It would look like a tarantula, and it would like crawl up the wall, and then it would disappear. And I know that makes me sound crazy, but that, whenever that would happen, almost 100%, I would have one of those attacks at night. And I don't know what it means, but that's what would happen. Another thing would be when I'm trying to go to sleep and I would play music in my head, because I'm a DJ by nature, and I love music, and I always, I play music inside my head. I think of music. But when I'm doing this, sometimes the music that I'm thinking of, it gets very vivid, very clear, almost as if I'm listening to it in real life. But I'm not. And even though it's a good feeling, I learned that when that happens, it's like it's as if I'm almost slipping into a different dimension or something. And that's when it happens. I'll be listening to a song in my head, and all of a sudden, boom, I'm paralyzed. So I learned that whenever that happens, I try to get myself up before I slip into that paralyzed state. And sometimes I make it and sometimes I don't. And when I make it, I get up and I go into the living room and I'll turn on the TV, and I'll usually watch TV until the daylight, because I did not want to experience the feeling of being paralyzed. And unfortunately, that's something I did for about 20 years. In the late 80s, Sally Jesse Raphael had a popular talk show. There was a priest on the show, and during this segment, he had asked the audience if they had ever experienced waking up and feeling a heavy presence on them, and not being able to talk, and not being able to move. And surprisingly, a lot of people raised their hands. And I looked at my mom, because we were both watching it. At this time, my mom knew what was going on with me. I had told her about these attacks that I was having. Well, the priest told everyone on the Sally Jesse Raphael show that this was the devil, and that he went on to say that, we need to get right and blah, blah, blah. And that just freaked me out even more. I mean, it was like my worst nightmare coming true. I'd rather believe that I was going crazy or something was wrong with me. This prompted my mom to get me a cross, and she told me, whenever these things were happening to me, to make a sign of the cross in my mind, and that God would be with me. I had one experience as a kid that was very weird. Now that I'm an adult and I think back, I think it was actually a gift, and it was an awesome experience. But at the time, I was scared to death. I wake up and I'm paralyzed, and I begin to feel myself float upward. And as usual, back then I was scared of this, so I fought to stay in my body. Now, as I was rising up, I began to come back down to my body, but instead of resting in my body, I kept going down. And all of a sudden, I hear my ears. It kind of felt and sounded as if I was underwater. And then I saw inside my body. I saw blood traveling through my veins. I could hear my heartbeat. and I heard a swooshing sound as if, the blood is going through my veins. It sounded like a swooshing sound. Can't explain how that happened, but I know that I had an experience where I was able to see inside of myself. And that is just, I feel even weird telling the story because that's just strange. But that's one of the experiences that I had. I don't know if I would do that again at will, but that was pretty awesome. It was 1989 or 1990, somewhere around there. And I was in my room. My room was in the basement at the time. And first, let me just tell you that this experience that I'm about to tell you about was the single most horrific experience that I have ever had, even to this date. But anyway, I was on my bed and I was trying to go to sleep. I had my little cassette player next to my ear, and I'm playing a song named Close to You. It was by a singer named Michelle A. And I have it on my ear and I'm listening to it. And the song only got maybe 2/3 of the way before all of a sudden I felt that familiar presence. And I tried to get up, but I couldn't. It was too late. I was paralyzed. And what happened next was I heard a growl. There was something in the room with me. And all of a sudden, something grabbed me and flung me off of the bed, okay? Threw me down to the ground, and something had a hold of me. I couldn't see it, but I knew it was big and I knew it was evil. And all I could hear was growling, and it threw me up to the ceiling, to the wall. It was just throwing me all over the place with such force. And all I could see, I couldn't feel pain, but I could feel pressure. Like I would hit the walls and the floor and the ceiling and the bed. I was all over the place, and I just remember praying. I'm like, oh my God, help me, God, help me. And all of a sudden, my door busted open. And there was this bright, shimmery light. I can't explain it. It was the brightest thing that I've ever seen. It was so bright that I could hear it. I could hear. The first thing I thought of when I saw this light was that I was dead, because I've always heard stories about when you die, you see a tunnel, or you see a light and then you see a tunnel. So I was kind of hesitant about the light. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to believe what was happening. But the moment that light came in through my door, because my door busted open and there was this gorgeous, bright, shimmery light coming inside. At that moment, whatever had a hold of me just let go. It was gone. It just disappeared. And I'm there on the floor, and I'm just looking at this light. It was just staying there. And I remember thinking to myself, does it want me to go to it? I didn't want to go, because I knew if I did, that would be the end. I thought that I was dead. But this light comes in, and then it disappeared. It slowly disappeared, and I was back in my body. And I jumped up, and I ran upstairs to the house as fast as I could. I've never ran so fast. I was so scared. And that was the last time I slept in that basement. But that one experience was the one that kept me afraid of out of body experiences for, a couple decades, until I realized and researched and really looked into it. But that was the most frightening experience in my life. Fast forward a few years, I'm about 25, 26. I moved back home for a little while because I was having some financial problems, and I had another experience. It was different though. This one, the only way I could describe it would be to say it was a remote hearing experience, not remote viewing. I've heard of that phenomenon, but this was a situation where I'm in my room. We had a 2-bedroom house, and my room was all the way in the back. And I was laying down, and I was just resting. I was maybe dozing off, and it was a very windy day. I remember that I could hear the wind outside. The window was closed. It may have been cracked just slightly, but I could hear the wind out there and I could hear it whistle. It was really strong and everything. And I'm dozing off, and all of a sudden the wind outside, it got louder, and it scared me because it was just like the situations where I talked about when I could hear the rain outside and it got louder. It was just like that. All of a sudden, it was like if I was outside. That's how clear I could hear the wind. And sure enough, I try to move. I get up and I can't move. I'm paralyzed. So I'm in that vibrational state again. And what happened was weird because I didn't leave my body, but I could hear footsteps, and it I heard the gate open to the front yard, which was impossible because my bedroom was too far away. There was no way I could hear that, and it sounded crystal clear. I mean, just as if I was right there. And I heard the footsteps, and they were coming, I assumed, closer to the house because I could hear my sister, and she greeted her boyfriend, and they had a conversation out there, and I could hear them as clear as day. I was in my room. I could see the window, and I knew that I was in my room on the bed. I couldn't move, but when you're in this paralyzed state, sometimes you can see. If you open your eyes, you can see and you can hear, but you can't really talk. And they were having a conversation up there on the front porch, and I could hear everything as clear as day, as if I was 2 feet away from them. And then, as the vibrational state went away, I was no longer paralyzed, and I get up and I go out there, and sure enough, I see my sister with her boyfriend, and they were talking about the exact same subject that I heard them talking about when I had this remote hearing experience. It was awesome. If I could control it, I would do it at will. It wasn't scary at all.